I've just invested 5p for luck in St Fintan's tree, or miraculously probably a shilling, because I think this is a very old custom. St Fintan's tree grows beside a busy main road that links Dublin and Limerick, and the custom of tapping coins into it is probably one of the last vestiges of tree worship you'll find in these islands.
Or is it? Trees as markers of both holy places and special seasons seem to have been so widespread in ancient times that it'd be surprising if there were no other relics. Dancing around a maypole is the modern version of a very ancient fertility festival that used to mark the coming of spring. Today, a white-painted pole replaces the original freshly cut forest tree. But in most places, such activities are now no more than a show for tourists, their original meaning long forgotten. Other sacred trees survive in their original form and manage to retain their significance even today. This is one 30 miles west of Dublin. Folklorist Dr. Patricia Lysak took me to see it.
We are here in a sacred site in the cemetery of Killeator, and we have here an ash tree which spreads over the holy well of dedicated to St. Patrick. There are numerous such trees throughout Ireland, and they have been treated with great respect and veneration over the centuries, and like this one here, in which it has become a virtual repository for votive offerings, that is, the little gifts left behind by pilgrims who have come here to wash their eyes and hoping to walk away whole with their sight intact.
There are thought to be around 3,000 holy wells in Ireland, and most of them have a tree associated with them. At the Abbey Shrine on the coast of Donegal, the well is actually on the beach at a spot supposedly visited by St. Patrick. The sacred tree is a young ash. It's the 15th of August, the shrine's Patten Day, and ordinary people have been coming here since dawn in spite of the weather.
They come to visit the well and the tree, and they are part of their pilgrim experience here. And they come to do the rounds around the well, around the tree, and they drink the water, and they hope for a cure or whatever. And they put a votive offering on the tree. In other words, they leave something behind, something of themselves. For example, they put rags on the tree, very colourful it is indeed, to indicate they had been there, to indicate to others they had been there, and always, if you like, almost as a sort of compensation and recompense for what they hope to get from the well.
The trees associated with holy wells were probably planted deliberately, but other sacred trees can be found growing wild in fields or even hedgerows.
Of course, I suppose the white thorn, or the sciac is the one that strikes us very particularly when we think of the lone tree, or when we think of the maybush. It has associated with itself very, very widespread significances, to the extent that it is protective outside the house. It is protective when it is cut down if it grows in a hedgerow, but it is not brought into the house. This is a tradition which one finds throughout Europe. It is unlucky to bring a white thorn into the house, although it is lucky to have it outside. Because on May Eve, when spring gave way to summer, it could be cut with safety from the hedgerow and placed before the house as the maybush.
This spring tradition is kept by dairy farmers like Bill Daly, who collects fresh flowers, mostly yellow, the colour of dairy cream, and also the Maytime colour, to decorate the tree in time for May Day.
It is placed before the door or placed at the gate of the farmyard, and its purpose is, I think, to reaffirm boundaries at the boundaryless time between one season and another, and to protect the milk and dairy produce, to protect the farmers' cows at that particular time.
Do you believe that these various different kinds of sacred trees are vestiges of a pre-Christian religion?
I think there is no doubt, but they are vestiges of a pre-Christian times, and even the maybush has, if you like, attached to it some vestiges of Christian tradition, because it has in many places since about the end of the 19th century become associated with the Virgin Mary. And in the maybush you have seen that there are blue twine attaching the flowers. I don't think this is entirely coincidence, because
Blue is the colour associated with the Virgin
blue is the
Mary.
colour associated with the Virgin Mary, and of course the month of May, since the late 19th century, is also Mary's month. And you have a sort of symbiosis between what has been pre-Christian and what is Christian. And of course also, this in my view has allowed in many places the Maybush tradition to continue in many parts of Leinster, East Connaught and South Ulster.
So here in the Irish Midlands, this Maybush tradition is a relic of the old spring festival, distant echoes of which can still be found in England. At Aston-on-Clun in Shropshire, they dance under the arbor tree on Oak Apple Day at the end of May. It was declared a public holiday by Charles II to celebrate his restoration to the throne in 1660. Since about the 1820s, it's died out nearly everywhere, but not here at Aston. A local villager told me why.
In this village, Squire Marston is a squire from Ochre, and the Ochre estate used to own all of Aston-on-Clun and the surrounding area. Squire Marston got married to a woman called Sarah Carter, who's from that way, a mile or two, and on the 29th of May, in 1786, and as they were coming through the village here to go home to Ochre, she saw the tree which had just been decorated, and thought, oh, isn't this charming? It must be for me. And of course it wasn't for her, it was just a coincidence. But they thought it was so lovely that the villagers had done the tree like this, that the Marston family left a sum of money to perpetuate the custom.
The annual festivities under the arbor tree used to include a reenactment of Squire Marston's wedding, complete with coach and horse. But this custom died out until it was revived recently, with primary school children playing the main parts.
Well, I felt it was a part of history that shouldn't die, and at the same time the children would thoroughly enjoy being dressed up in period costume from 1786, which they do. They thoroughly enjoy it, although the bride and groom, they're married in the afternoon and are divorced in the evening. Right up to this evening, so you love her. I know you'll be divorced this evening, but...
Are you proud of your arbor tree here at Aston-on-Clun?
Very, yes, very. Yes, I think it's a focal point, and people come from all over the country and the world to look at our black poplar, yes. Especially with the flags are flying.
But this tree is famous for another reason, one that harks back to those ancient beliefs about spring festivals and fertility.
It used to be called the magic tree. The old parish clerk, he told us that at one time the parish used to present couples in the village with a cutting from this tree as a sort of good luck thing. And they stopped doing it because all the women got pregnant within the year. People used to write to the parish asking for a cutting from this tree because they couldn't have children themselves. In the 1950s or 60s, there was a kind of outbreak of people wanting a cutting from this magic tree because they heard that all the village maidens were having babies very easily. So it's curious.
So do you think maybe what we've seen here today is a relic of something much older, possibly pagan?
I think it's very pagan, yes. I think the original idea behind the tree being decorated at all is a very old thing. I think Charles II sort of picked up on something that was already going on and enhanced it with his own ideas. No, maybe to his own glorification, I don't know.
The meaning of Arbor Day may have changed through the ages. One thing that stayed the same is the central role of the tree. The Holy Thorn tree in front of St John's Church at Glastonbury in Somerset. It's the 18th of December and local dignitaries are gathering for the annual ceremony called Clipping the Thorn. Today's thorn tree is thought to be descended from an original hawthorn that grew here nearly 2,000 years ago. It's miraculous because, amazingly, it flowers every winter, usually in time for Christmas. The tree is blessed by the church, so today's ceremony is directed by the Anglican vicar.
And especially for the young they know why, legend tells us that this thorn was brought by Joseph of Arimathea here to Glastonbury.
The ancient clipping ceremony was revived in the 1920s. The task of cutting the first flowers is entrusted to the oldest pupil of the church infant school. This year it's Karen Jensen.
I'm going to ask Karen to come and help me and the mayor to cut the thorn.
It all started a long time ago when Joseph had sailed to England, and he climbed up a hill and he put his stick in the ground, and in the morning some buds had appeared. And we call it the Holy Thorn because it's a thorn bush, and it comes from the Holy Land. After the bits that have been cut, it goes to the Queen Mother or the Queen. And afterwards they send us a letter to say thank you.
And what do they do with it?
They put it on their dinner table at Christmas time.
These days there are several holy thorn trees in Glastonbury, one of them in the grounds of the famous ruined abbey. A botanist who's investigated these trees is Roy Vickery, keeper of flowering plants at London's Natural History Museum. He's made several winter visits to see the trees and observe their eccentric flowering.
Well, this is an example of the Holy Glastonbury thorn, which has been growing in Glastonbury now for the last 500 years or so. I think these buds will come out if there's any warm weather later on. And of course we've still got the remains of last year's fruits here on the tree, which is one of the attractive things about the Glastonbury thorn. It does have these red fruits and the white flowers at the same time.
Some botanists think that the tree could be a Middle Eastern variety of hawthorn, which could strengthen the story of its origin. But the tourists visiting the gift shop aren't concerned with such niceties. They just want a souvenir, for luck.
I think in a case like this tree, the Glastonbury tree, people do get a certain reassurance about it. It flowers at Christmas each year, and when it continues to produce its blossoms at the right time each year, people get reassured things are going right. Thorns still flowering at the right time of year. I think that's what people like about it. And of course it does provide a link with the past. It provides a link right back to Christ himself, because Joseph was an uncle of Christ, so this tree has supposedly descended from a staff carried by Christ's uncle. So it's a nice, strong legend.
Admittedly, Glastonbury is a rather mystical place, but why should such a distinguished botanist be interested in legends, however strong?
Well, I suppose it's just interest of mine which has grown up over the years. I think a lot of botany, particularly systematic botany, where you're trying to classify plants, is concerned with man's attitude to plants, how we see plants, and I think folklore is yet another way of looking at plants and seeing how we react to them.
But aren't these just old wives' tales? Do they have any more significance than that?
I'm sure there is. It's been, so many of these things have been so strong and for so long. I mean, for example, in Ireland, there is this belief that you shouldn't cut down a hawthorn tree. Well, if we had this belief in parts of Britain, certainly our countryside would look much healthier, there'd be more birds around and this sort of thing. So there obviously is some truth in these, or some underlying truth in some of these ideas.
In Ireland, the hawthorn certainly has a strange reputation, as does the rowan. Isolated specimens are often fairy trees, and Irish fairies are very different creatures to the ones we find in Victorian children's stories. Growing in the middle of a peat bog here in the Blue Stack Mountains is a round tree with a mysterious look to it. In the cottage on the hill lives the farmer, Jimmy Burke.
Was in Clanenagh, Yetzer, the fairies, and Clanenagh, and the fairies, Clanenagh, sin Cuisin and then the fairies. They're trying to beg the fairies a Cuisin. Crenta, Clanenagh galore so fast. Scarce and slash. And you're trying to be in the fairies are clear.
The tradition of the lone tree as a haunt of the little people is a strong one in these parts. Such trees tend to be avoided. Jimmy hasn't been near his since a strange experience nearly 50 years ago.
Die Mr. Clanenagh see you wine and so you go on lampas. Be was the boss and try it. I was the man the minister for Salisbury couldn't tell him. And he asked me then a bay in Salisbury. Hey, was she fairy beyond no good. We Salisbury can make here from. Ja, en we man weer dan de feries dat we laten me. We zeggen daar op Polmono.
Not all fairy trees have such a harmless reputation. The local people have many dark tales about this one near Ballyshannon.
A man, I won't say his name, he's dead now anyway. We had a very severe winter, and he was, needed firewood, and he gathered dead sticks that were laying about under the fairy tree, and probably took branches off it. I'm not sure about that. In any case, he took sticks from the fairy tree, and he used them for firewood. And within the year, he had died. He was dead. And at his wake, when he was laid out, the neighbours, I didn't see it myself, but the neighbours, my mother and other neighbours around were talking, and I heard them say he looked like a fairy man. He had wheezed up, and they said, well, he shouldn't have he shouldn't have burned those sticks from the fairy tree. I heard those words. I actually heard that myself. My Aunt Josie, who's dead now, her children brought little pods that they found lying around the tree when they were children. And they brought them up to her, and she asked them where they found them, and they told her. And she looked inside the pods, and there was something that looked like little babies, and she made them put them back where they found them. The story, my Aunt Josie, who seemed to be the local expert on fairies, if you like, she maintains that these fairies are the spirits of dead people who have died before Christianity, before they could, go to heaven. And that they're sort of living in a sort of limbo. And they've taken refuge somehow in the trees, certain trees.
Fairy trees may be an Irish speciality, but many people find they can relate to trees at a spiritual level. This is a field back in Shropshire, where I joined members of an organisation called Tree Spirit during their annual moot. We started off by planting an apple tree, with a certain amount of ceremony.
Everyone connect. Connect our consciousness and our thoughts to trees. Connect to our love for trees, connect to our love for the earth. Connect to the unity of us all here in the circle.
Started a few years ago, 84, 85 sort of time, so we could get across to people the importance of trees, importance of planting trees, and also the deeper sort of level of trees, how you can sort of relate to trees and how trees can relate to people, and sort of a two-way relationship. People can get a lot of things from trees. Simply sitting underneath trees, relaxing, or even deeper still, meditating with trees. And on another deeper level, some people communicate with trees in their own special sort of ways. It's not like a one-to-one talking relationship, but in their own deeper ways they sort of relate to trees. And we thought, by the time we got this message across, though it might seem a bit wacky to a lot of people. And then people can realise it's their relationship to the earth, and you need to respect the earth to live in harmony instead of like most people do today, just totally out of harmony.
Later on, we shared a meal round the campfire. They all clearly have a very special attitude to trees. So I asked one of the leading lights, Hazel Birch, about her relationship with trees.
For me, it's about an affinity with nature, with the earth. And I feel I can connect particularly well with the spirit of trees, with tree spirits. But I also can with flowers, with wildflowers, for instance. But trees, I feel, have a particularly strong auras, and they've been through a lot. They've seen a lot. They've sort of seen a lot of the battles of life and survived, and they have a lot of strength to give off.
Do you want to spread this feeling? Do you want to change people? Do you want more and more people to become involved in what you're doing?
It would be nice if people did, but it really comes from a change from within. A change where people begin to acknowledge and recognise trees as sacred, where they connect within themselves to the spirit of nature and the spirit of the earth and the spirit of life. It's really about that.
Tree worship is something we normally associate with distant cultures or ancient times. But it seems that for many people, the spirit of trees has a very real meaning here and now.